boa tarde a todo mundo que está acompanhando DigiLabor Summer School. Meu nome é Rafael Groma, coordenador do Laboratório de Pesquisa DigiLabor, do Programa de Pós-Graduação em Comunicação da Universidade do Vale do Rio dos Sinos, a Unicinos, e hoje temos o segundo encontro do DigiLabor Summer School com o professor Christian Fuchs, que é professor da Universidade de Westminster, editor da revista Triple C e autor de uma série de livros, como o mais recente sobre comunicação e capitalismo. Tem outros muito conhecidos no Brasil, como Karl Marx e Trabalho Digital, Mídias Sociais, uma introdução crítica, e tem sido uma liderança nesse tema do trabalho digital e tem trabalhado muito nessa interface da comunicação com o capitalismo. O último artigo dele em português foi publicado na revista Matrizes, da USP, sobre o papel da comunicação no capitalismo de coronavírus. Professor Christian, welcome to DigiLabor Summer School. Thank you for having us, and finally to know virtually each other, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, so thank you, Raphael, for the invitation. Thank you for those who are joining live or who are listening. So I will talk about the Marxist political economy of digital labor. I will share my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation that you should be able to see. Can you see that, Raphael? Does it work?
Yeah.
All right, great. So the Marxist political economy of digital labor, that's one of the topics I have been working on in the past years. And what I'm interested in is to critically theorize what digital labor is all about. Yeah, so I consider myself to be a critical theorist using Marx's work as a starting point. There are some books that I have written. I'm mentioning those that are relevant for the analysis of digital labor. There's a book that you can also access online as an open access book called Communication and Capitalism, a Critical Theory. There is a book called Marxism, which is an introduction to Karl Marx's work for media, communication, and cultural studies. In 2014, I published a book called Digital Labor and Karl Marx that I'm also drawing upon in this talk. There is a second part of digital labor and Karl Marx called Culture and Economy in the Age of Social Media, where I'm responding to criticism and I'm elaborating further questions about the political economy of digital labor in this book. My most well-known book is called Social Media: Critical Introduction. It's a book for teaching for students. Yeah? There's also quite some information in it about digital labor as one of the topics, and about how to critically study social media in general. The third, the English edition of that book will be published in March or April, and it's completely revised and expanded. And I also have another forthcoming book, also this spring, called Marxist Humanism and Communication Theory, which is the first volume in a 5 or 6 volume series of books that I am about to write, called Communication and Society. I have some sections that I want to talk about, but I won't be able to go through everything. Yeah, maybe just the first two probably. Yeah, digital labor. What is digital labor all about? I will talk about some examples of how to analyze and theorize digital labor. Then I could say more about digital capital and about the relationship of work and communication, but that would take too long probably. Let's see how long it takes me for the first 2 sections, and then I will draw some conclusions. So digital labor. Yeah. So when talking about labor or digital labor, I'm starting with the works of Karl Marx. Yeah? And Marx argued that production and work are quite important aspects of society and of human beings. So in the German ideology, Marx and Engels wrote that humans produce their means of subsistence in order to satisfy human needs, which constitutes the production of material life itself. So if you ask yourself, what is this materialism that Marx and Engels talk about? What does it mean in society, actually? It means that human beings produce means of subsistence, yeah, and they do so in social relations. So you could say social production is the essence of human activities and of society. When it comes to work, then Marx has like it has a double character. It has an anthropological and a historical character. When he talks about the anthropological character of work, he says that work is a natural condition of human existence. Yeah, so human beings have to produce, and they have to produce socially in order to survive. Yeah, so it's part of their survival, and that's also what in later works, especially in Capital Volume 1, Marx calls concrete work. So concrete work is activity that is goal-oriented and produces use values that satisfy human needs. But then Marx is not just a general social theorist, while at the same time developing a general social theory, he of course also develops a critical theory and a critical political economy of capitalism and class society. So he's interested how work turns into labor and how labor looks like as the specific form of the organization of work in a capitalist society. He says labor is about what he calls abstract labor. He writes it's a matter of the how much, of the temporal duration of labor. Yeah, so labor in capitalist society is all about measurement. It's about the output that is measured. It's about labor time that is measured, and of course, what capitalists want their employees, the workers, to do is to produce as much commodities per unit of time, yeah, let's say per hour or per day, for as little wage as possible, because that increases wages. So abstract labor is about value, and it is about absolute and relative surplus value production. So methods of how ever more value can be produced in specific amounts of time. You've probably realized that I'm using the term work and I'm using the term labor, yeah, and I'm distinguishing between these two terms, yeah. So I don't think that work and labor are the same, yeah. Harry Cleaver, the autonomist political theorist who also wrote books about Marx, argues that the term work did not exist before capitalism, and that Marx projects a capitalist category backward in history and generalizes it, and thereby he basically argues that Marx's use of the term work thereby is a kind of fetishistic undertaking. I disagree with this assessment. I think it's wrong, yeah, what Harry Cleaver says about work, because there is already etymologically and linguistically, there is a difference in the English language between work and labor, or in German, there's the term Werktätigkeit and also Arbeit. Yeah, and I mean, you can see here in many different languages there are also two terms always. Yeah, and if you trace the etymology of these terms of work or werken in German, yeah, then I mean these languages have the common source in the Indo-European languages, where work and werken goes back to doing, acting, and being effective. Yeah, which just means that people do something, the act, the effect, and change society by work processes, and that's the general understanding. Whereas the term labor has a completely different etymological root. Yeah, it goes back to laborem, Latin word that means toil, hardship, pain. Yeah, or in German, Arbeit goes back to the term for slave. Yeah, so there are linguistically, you could say it makes sense to distinguish between work as something general and labor as alienated forms of work taking place in class relations, which always implies that there is exploitation. Nowadays, I mean, when we talk about digital labor, then there's lots of talk about a digital revolution, a computer revolution, and so on. I mean, this takes place at the level of technology. And the level of technology is part of what Marx called the productive forces. Yeah? However, Marx said that a mode of production consists of a dialectic of productive forces and relations of production. And I think when we are talking about how computing changes the economy, then computing and digital technologies, they are part of the productive forces. So I would distinguish between agricultural productive forces, that result in basic agricultural products, that are taken from nature, or natural products, industrial productive forces where technologies are used for changing these products of nature and manufacturing goods. And then there are digital technologies and informational productive forces that result in the production of experiences, ideas, or informational products, including also digital products. And I think that's so. The digital technologies are a type of machinery and part of the means of production that are part of the productive forces. And this stands, I mean, in class relations, when we analyze the mode of production in capitalist society or the capitalist social formation, the important class relation is the one between the working class and the capitalist class. So in a Marxist understanding, we need always to relate computing to the relationship between labor and capital. So this an analysis of labor and capital, the class relation, is really the key point for a Marxist analysis of society. But we can see, I mean, I looked at general data from the International Labour Organization. We can see significant changes in employment structures. So these are the data I used here. Is global employment in these three sectors: agriculture, manufacturing, and service employment. And we can see that since the early 1990s until today, the worldwide agricultural employment has decreased from a share of 43.3% to today around a quarter of all employment, whereas service employment has increased from about a third to more than half. And that's globally. So it includes that is not just Western developed countries. This also includes all developing countries in the world. But I think this has to do with the way that productive forces are changing. But these productive forces stand in the context of class relations. And for Marx, class in capitalism means, as I already said, that there is an exploiting class, the capitalist class, that exploits the labor of the working class, that produces surplus value and commodities that are not owned by the working class, but that are together with the means of production, the private property of the capitalist class. Marx writes about the capitalist class relation, that the labor market is quite important there. It's the silent compulsion of economic relations. He writes that the worker works under the control of the capitalist to whom his labor belongs. He writes that in capitalism, the product is the property of the capitalist and not that of the worker, although the worker is the immediate producer. I mean, that's an economic analysis, but at the same time, you can see the socialist and communist moral political imperative that is already inside of these definitions. So Marx says for capitalism to work, the surplus value needs to be produced by the workers and it needs to be stolen from them. But that it's stolen, that it's robbed, that it's not their collective possession, that it's the possession of the capitalist class. That's not just functionally speaking how capitalism works, but it's also morally and politically speaking the scandal of exploitation on which capitalism is based in its very economic structure. So capital is based on the exploitation of the working class. That's why Marx describes in Capital workers in capitalism as a machine for the production of surplus value, and capitalists as a machine for the transformation of the surplus value into surplus capital. And of course, in Marx's notion, or at least in this interpretation of Marx that I'm using, the notion of alienation is very important. I mean, there are certain Marxists like Louis Althusser, who has become very prominent in structuralism, very influential, and in French Marxism, who say that one should not go into dealing too much with the notion of alienation. Yeah, I must say I never understood the fascination that Althusser has on many people, because in his autobiography he wrote that he never read Marx and other philosophers, and that he was just copying what his students were writing and what Etienne Balibar and others were writing. So he describes himself as a trickster. Yeah, and he says that alienation is an early Marx concept by Marx that is very esoteric. And I disagree with that. I think alienation is a concept in Marx that Marx already in his very early works, I listed here the contribution to the critique of Hegel's philosophy of law from 1843, where he introduced this notion of alienation. That's early Marx, but also the very late Marx in Capital Volume 1, 2, 3 also uses the notion of alienation. Yeah? And he says economic alienation means the complete loss of the human being of the conditions of production. Yeah, so in class relations and in capitalist society, humans are not in control of the means of production of the goods that they produce and the value that they produce. Which is why Marx in the Grundrisse speaks of the working class as being absolutely poor. Yeah, what he means by that is that the working class is absolutely poor. It's not an impoverishment theory. He means whatever they produce, they do not own it. Whatever goods they produce, whatever value they produce, it's immediately the property of the capitalist class. At the same time, he says this absolute poverty of the working class is also the general possibility of wealth as subject and activity. So without the exploitation of the working class and without the working class producing commodities, there would also be no surplus value and there would be no capitalist class. So on the one hand, the working class is exploited. On the other hand, politically speaking, because there is no production and there are no commodities without the labor of the working class, it's also immensely powerful, which means when it goes on strikes, when workers go on strike and they put down the means of production, they simply refuse to continue to work, then there's a standstill. Yeah? And if this standstill continues, then there's a crisis. All right, so how you can imagine, this is a Hegelian triangle that visualizes the labor process, where there is a human being, a subject, working together with other human beings. There are the means of production that the workers are using, which results in what Hegel calls a subject-object. Yeah? That's the product of work. Yeah? And alienation means that in capitalist class relations, the workers do not control the conditions of work. They do not control themselves, the subject. They do not own the means of production. That's the object, and they do not own the product of work. Yeah, that's how you can imagine this process of alienation. Yeah, and alienation is also something that Marx describes in Capital, Volume 1, for example, and in the other volumes. He says that the worker constantly produces objective wealth in the form of capital, which is an alien power because it's owned by the capitalist class. Yeah, and the capitalist produces the worker as a wage laborer. This quote's a bit longer, but I don't go into details. Yeah, what you can see here visualized is how Marx describes the capital accumulation process. I mean, that's the core process of the capitalist economy, where money is used to purchase commodities, means of production and labor power. That labor power then uses the means of production for producing a new commodity, C prime, that is sold on the market in order to realize a profit, which is M prime. Parts of it is reinvested, and the capital accumulation cycle starts all over again. And I think, I mean, lots of things have been written about how to analyze labor. There is labor process analysis and other things and so on. And the question, how do you actually analyze labor? In lots of this literature, it's critical literature, you do not find a kind of toolkit on how to analyze labor. Yeah, what I provided here, I mean, this is a model that I worked out together with Marisol Sandoval. Yeah, is systematic aspects of the labor process. And there are questions that you can ask when doing an analysis of labor conditions. So you can have a look at the means of production. You can have a look at the labor force, workforce characteristics. mental, physical health, work experiences, and so on. We need to have a look at the production process, at space and time, the work process, issues of control and surveillance. We need to analyze what products, what commodities are being produced. We need to have a look at aspects of the state, at labor legislation, and so on. Yeah, I keep that very short. Yeah, but what I'm basically talking about is the working class. And of course, non-Marxist analysts have for a long time, since the rise of postmodern theory, which I oppose. I'm opposed to postmodern theory, and I put against it a Marxist, humanist, and socialist humanist interpretation of Marx. They for a long time argued labor and class no longer matters. Let's focus on identity politics, which has somehow converged with neoliberal politics. Some like the Marxist scholar Adolf Reed, they call identity politics the left wing of neoliberal ideology. So I'm interested. I think there is a working class in the world. We can measure how large that working class is, and we can objectively prove that it's exploited, and we can even measure how large this exploitation of surplus value is. These are statistics from the International Labour Organization World Employment and Social Outlook, global data, for the early 90s and nowadays. And you can see there that the total labor force today is around 3.5 billion individuals. That's globally. That's the global working class, or part of the global working class. Whereas the employers, the capitalists, they are around 100 million people, so which is fairly small actually, whereas 3.5 billion is very large. But then there are also others. There are poor people, who are, for example, unemployed, and then there are retired people. And I think the poor people, the poor of the world, who are not working or who don't have wage labor, they should also be seen as being part of the working class, or is what Marx called an industrial reserve army. And then there are retired people who are no longer in part of the active labor force. They are also not in the statistics, but retired people, we can assume that they are to the same share part of the capitalist class and the working class, because when they were still active in labor activities, I mean, a small part of them were capitalists, and a much larger part of them were part of the working class. And if we add these people, then it's another 2.1 billion individuals that we need to add to the working class, which then means the global working class consists of around 5.7 billion individuals, around 6 billion people of the world population, whereas the capitalist class just consists of around 100 million people. So around, this means if the world population is around 7.7 billion inhabitants, 74% of it are part of the working class, 1.4% are part of the capitalist class. So you can see the working class is really the largest human group that we have. I mean, we're all human beings. The humanity is the largest group of individuals on the earth. But then when we can divide humanity into certain groups, and class is the most important distinction, also quantitatively, because the largest, I mean, it's the largest group that we have in society. I mean, there are a bit more like men, women, around 50% each, smaller than the working class actually. But the capitalist class is very small. It's very rich. It owns the massive amount of means of production and of money and capital and wealth, but it's just 1.4% of the world population. I mean, you realize that there is a certain percentage share, a bit less than 25% missing here. That's children, who are underage. I did not include them in the statistic because they are not yet working and are in education and so on. And I don't want to assume, for example, that children of a capitalist are also part of the capitalist class. Because, for example, Marx and Engels were also the children of people coming out of the bourgeoisie. I mean, Engels' father was an industrialist, but nonetheless, you would not say Engels was part of the capitalist class. Marx introduced the notion of the Gesamtarbeiter, the collective worker. Yeah, so he says when we look at labor processes, we should not simply look at not just at the individual worker. You can look at the individual worker, but he says in capitalism, work has been socialized and is socializing itself through the development of the means of the productive forces ever more, so that the worker is a collective actor. Yeah, and that's I took this idea for thinking about digital labor, because I think the digital worker, I mean, there are individuals who are digital workers, but the digital worker is also a collective worker. Yeah, and in this context, I introduced the idea in the book Digital Labor and Karl Marx of the international division of digital labor, or you could generalize it and say an international division of communication labor. These are always Hegelian triangles where you have a worker, means of production, and a product, and they are interlinked. So there's an international division of labor. And I think all of this is part of digital labor. Yeah. So first, think of the laptop that you are now using or the mobile phone for watching me talk about digital labor. These are physical goods. They need to be produced. So first, minerals are extracted from the earth. Yeah, they are mine workers. Lots of them produce so-called conflict minerals. Lots of them in Africa under slave-like conditions. And of course, that's very physical labor, but I would say that's also a form of digital labor, because that's the very physical foundation of digital technologies. Then the minerals, I mean, are transformed into components. The components are assembled into media technologies, certain hardware, computers, printers, phones, and so on. Yeah, and this assemblage takes primarily place in China by Chinese workers, yeah, like the Foxconn workers or the Pegatron workers, who work under Taylorist conditions, you could say. I mean, Taylorism is like 100 years old, and Alain Lipitz, the French Marxist theorist, was speaking of bloody Taylorism as a continuation of Taylorism that continues until today, where there is blood, sweat, and tears of workers. Yeah, and these workers in China, they face very hard working conditions. Yeah, with overwork, very low wages, military drill, and so on. Yeah, that's also a form of digital labor. And then finally, based on using these technologies, there is another form of digital work: those who produce content, platform workers, software engineers, designers, and so on. Yeah, so that's all digital labor that produces some kind of content based on digital technologies as means of production. And all of this, I mean, all of these types of digital labor are related. Yeah, there's not just one of it, and they are exploited sometimes by the very same companies. Yeah, so there, and Marx gives us a kind of toolkit, an analytical and theoretical political economy toolkit for analyzing these different kinds of labor. Yeah, so for example, the mineral workers, Marx has analyzed slave labor. Yeah, or the Foxconn workers, we can use terms such as absolute surplus value production, primitive accumulation, and so on. But then there are also very well-paid workers in the digital working class, such as the Google software engineers. Yeah, now finally, after 20 years of existence of Google, some Google workers have finally formed a union. Yeah, I think it has 600 members now, but it's typically for the software industry that the labor there is non-unionized. Yeah, because the consciousness of lots of software engineers is more a bourgeois consciousness sometimes, and they more feel like managers. But of course, when they start with layoffs, or there are problems in the company, maybe then they find out, well, a union might not be a bad thing. Yeah, but I would characterize the Google workers, they have very high salaries and so on. They are part of the working class, but I would characterize them as what Lenin and Engels called a labor aristocracy. And then there are other forms of labor, yeah, that we can analyze also with different kind of categories by Marx. I don't go into all details here because I don't have so much time. But my key point is that There is an international division of digital labor. Digital labor takes place globally. Yeah, there are different types of labor that are related to each other. They feed into each other. So one dialectic is connected to the next dialectic. Yeah, but that's just the digital working class, and all of them together they form a collective worker. Yeah, this notion of Gesamtarbeiter by Marx that is exploited by digital capital as a collective class. So there's not just collective labor, there's also collective capital as a collective class. Yeah, and all of this, the international division of labor takes place globally. Yeah, and I build my own work a bit also on David Harvey, yeah, because I think David Harvey is one of the most important contemporary Marxist humanist theorists, and in his book, The Condition of Postmodernity, he introduced this idea of capitalism developing in the form of waves of time-space compression. Yeah, and he refers to Marx's formulation in the Grundrisse that capital is able to drive beyond every spatial barrier, which means capital globalizes. It has an imminent tendency to globalize itself. Globalization of capital is not something new that emerged in the 1990s. Also, the phase of imperialist capitalism that Lenin was describing, or in my opinion, the best analyst of classical imperialism is Rosa Luxemburg. Yeah? I mean, I'm more into Rosa Luxemburg than Lenin as a socialist theorist. Yeah? But they described the existence of global capitalism more than 100 years ago. So you could say that in the imperialist phase, 100 years ago, capitalism was also global. Then there was the phase of after 1945 of Fordist capitalism, where there was more deglobalization, more focus on production within bounded nation states. Of course, there was also world trade continuing, but you could see more focus on production within bounded nation states. And then there was a big crisis in the 1970s that Harvey describes. Profit rates were falling, and then there was the emergence of neoliberal global capitalism, a new phase of global capitalism. And I think what we are now experiencing since the 2008 crisis, I think, is that we are on the verge towards a new phase in capitalist development. We do not know how exactly that will look like, but to me, it looks like that. I mean, there's a rise of fascism, like fascists like Donald Trump in the US, or I mean, Bolsonaro in Brazil, where Brazilian colleagues are hosting this talk actually, and they are also nationalists, yeah, which also has impacts on the economy. Yeah, like there is more. It's not the end of global capitalism, but there's more talk about protectionism again, but also a rise of a racist division of labor and new nationalism and so on. Yeah, one can say much more about that, but that's another stream of my work. Because digital labor analysis is one stream of my work. The analysis of right-wing extremism online is my other contemporary stream of analysis. Yeah, but here I want to focus on these aspects. Yeah, but in this capital accumulation process, there are different elements: labor power, means of production, commodity markets, capital and capital investments. Yeah, and when Marx and Harvey say that capital drives beyond every spatial barrier, or Harvey says capital cannot abide a limit, then in globalization, this means that all of these factors, labor power, means of production, commodity markets, and capital, are organized at a global scale. Yeah, because capital seeks to produce ever cheaper, and it needs new spaces for production. Yeah? And I think that is what has been going on since the 1970s, a new phase of what Harvey calls time-space compression, the rise of neoliberal capitalism, a new phase of globalization. And the international division of digital labor is not caused by the rise of digital technologies. It's caused by digital technologies standing in class relations. And these class relations at the meta level, at the level of totality globally, have to do with these transformations of capitalism towards what Harvey calls a new imperialism. I think that's the context for the rise of digital labor. My next section is about some very specific, 3 specific examples about of digital labor that I want to analyze. First, how labor has been transformed in the recent COVID-19 pandemic. Second, online freelancers, and third, the labor, unpaid digital labor that produces the value that drives Google and Facebook. So these are the 3 I want to analyze. I mean, at the moment, I'm particularly interested in how labor and society and life in general is being transformed by the global COVID-19 pandemic. There's lots of things you can say about this. I will limit myself to just one element. At the moment, I'm writing a book about the COVID-19 pandemic. It will be called Communicating COVID-19. And well, it's a Marxist analysis of COVID-19 and how it has transformed communication and how this relates to capitalism. And labor analysis is one aspect of it, whereas the ideology critique, the critique of ideology, is another aspect, because there are a lot of new ideologies around, conspiracy theories like QAnon, that combines itself with right-wing extremist ideology and with anti-vaccination ideology and so on. But here I will focus on, and that's one part of this book that I'm writing. The conspiracy theories like COVID-19 was created by Bill Gates in order to obtain world power and make money from a vaccine, which is complete nonsense. And it's also it's not even economic reductionist, because Bill Gates is so rich that he can act as a philanthrope, also like George Soros and others. He can afford to do something good without, he has so much money that he can give away part of his money as a gift and can invest it into the Gates Foundation that spreads out this money. So he has no need to make money from vaccines, actually. Yes, it's a complete nonsensic and dangerous conspiracy theory. And conspiracy theory joins itself then with right-wing extremism in this context. But that's another topic. I want to talk about how in the COVID-19 pandemic, labor has changed and the role of digital labor in it. And for doing that, I'm relying on a French Marxist, Henri Lefebvre. I mean, I already mentioned that I think the work by Althusser, I think it's rubbish. I think one should not read it. I think it's a waste of time. I think it's poor philosophy. I cannot understand how it has influenced so many thinkers that consider themselves structuralist thinkers or post-structuralist thinkers. I think it's, and I would not even call it Marxist theory, actually. But there is good French Marxist theory, which is the tradition of French Marxist humanism. And I think the most important representative was Henri Lefebvre. I think Henri Lefebvre, Marxist humanist, I think he was the Georg Lukács of France, I would call him. And I think he has written something like 90 books. Lots of them have not been, unfortunately, not been translated from French into other languages and also not into English. But one probably his most well-known book is The Critique of Everyday Life, a 3-volume book that analyzes how the everyday life of the working class looks like and is damaged by capitalism. I mean, you could say The Critique of Everyday Life, it means something like it's like how has life been alienated by capitalism. And what I'm talking about here is also published in an article called Everyday Life and Everyday Communication in Coronavirus Capitalism. And Raphael told me that this article has also just been published in Portuguese. So you can also look for it in Portuguese for those who are joining us from Brazil or Portugal, or those whose mother tongue is Portuguese. And I think what is changing in society, we can analyze it with Lefebvre's distinction. He says in everyday life, there are 2 levels. He calls one level the lived, le vécu in French, and the other level the living, le vivre. And these are 2 dimensions. The lived more has to do with the individual and its experiences, knowledge, and its practices. It has to do with the present. The living, le vivre, has to do with the group, with the context of activity or the horizon of activities, and more with structures. So what Lefebvre describes is a kind of dialectic of practices and structures. Some people say this goes back to Giddens' theory of structuration. No, I think Giddens just copied it from Marx, because Marx already in the 1840s, in the economic and philosophic manuscripts of 1844, talked about the human being being a species being and a social being that on the one hand acts through its practices and through production, and through work, and on the other hand thereby creates structures that that condition further activities and practices. And Lefebvre says everyday life is an intermediate and mediating level of society. And then what I find interesting in the context of the pandemic is that he says in phases of fundamental social change, in phases of crisis, everyday life is suspended, shattered, or changed. And I think that has happened in the past year now. Now it's a year ago that the COVID-19 pandemic started. This crisis, coronavirus crisis, it has suspended, shattered, and changed the everyday life of all of us. Which is why we are now doing lots of online conferencing and so on. And lots of work takes place online. I think this is a visualization of everyday life as Lefebvre imagines it, but it's my image. There are human beings interacting in social relations. There are communicative practices. So communication is the process of production that enables the creation of social relations. But this interacts with a structural level. That's the upper level, where we have social structures, social systems, social institutions that are part of different realms of society, the economic system, the political system, the cultural systems. And when we enter these social relations, then we enter into different social roles, like in the economy, a worker, in politics, a citizen, in the cultural life, I don't know, a fan in the fan community, a friend, a lover, a family member, and so on. Different social roles. I think this is what happens in the pandemic crisis. So there is still this interaction of the level of the lived and the living, but under normal circumstances, there is a kind of separation of social roles and of activities within bounded social systems that are interacting, but our social roles, how they are organized in everyday life, are physically and temporally separate from each other. But what happens now in the pandemic is that the home becomes a supra-locale, a supra-place, so to speak, from where all of everyday life takes place. Our economic activities, our political activities, our family activities, friendship activities, they all converge in the activities taking place at home. I mean, for those who have children, it poses the problem of, on the one hand, when schools or nurseries are locked down and people work from home, of having to take care of the children and having to work at the same time. So it can also be an overburdening. It's quite difficult when this convergence takes place. But I think this is how work has actually changed largely, that the home takes on the role of a supra-place, activities that humans usually perform in different social roles at different times in different places, converge in activities that are now conducted in one universally unzoned and unstructured space-time in one place, the home. This means basically, when all those people who now work from home, they do it over the internet. So lots of people become now digital workers. You could say not everyone, but lots of people are digital workers now, working from home. However, there's then also a division between those who can work from home and certain work that cannot be performed over the internet. So not every work can be conducted from the home. And this also creates inequalities. It's in the pandemic crisis, it's a privilege if you can work as a digital worker from home. But think, for example, of all the nurses and doctors in the hospitals. Of course, they cannot work from home. I mean, they are on the front line fighting for the survival of human beings. Of course, they also have a higher risk, of course, which I think should be taken into account when we have these discussions. Yeah, and one example of a specific form of work that cannot be conducted from home, yeah, is the butchering of meat. Yeah, meat slaughtering and manufacturing. There's a German transnational company called Tönnies. It's basically it operates meat factories, yeah, where cows and pigs are slaughtered and processed, yeah, and you can buy the meat then in the supermarket. Yeah, that's from its website. It says we are manufacturing healthy and enjoyable food based on sustainable animal husbandry and its responsible production. So it's a meat industry, slaughtering and meat processing. Yeah, German company. It has a very large meat factory in Reda-Wiedenbrück, a city in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany, where there are 16,500 employees. Yeah, so it's a very, very large meat processing plant. Yeah, and in spring this year, there were 1,500 COVID-19 cases in this one plant. Yeah, so it's almost 10% of the employees who caught the virus. Now you can ask yourself, why is it those processing and slaughtering meat, basically workers in the meat industry? Yeah, the reason is these the workers there, they are low paid. There are many immigrant workers, especially from European Eastern European countries. They live in crowded dormitories. Yeah, they don't have proper employment contracts. It's bogus self employment. Yeah, so that and given the crowded accommodations that they work in, yeah, and also crowded workplaces. Yeah, I mean mass slaughtering of cows and so on little space. All of this makes it more likely that the virus is contracted in meat factories. So workers like this part of the working class, they're really in the pandemic the poorest of the poor, because they are very likely to catch the virus. Yeah. But then wherever there's labor, there's also capital. Clemens Tönnies and family. Clemens Tönnies is in the list of the 2,000 richest persons in the world. He's at the moment ranked on position 1,196 with a wealth of 2.2 billion US dollars. And of course, why does he have 2.2 billion US dollars? Well, exactly because he exploits the immigrants, pays low wages. There are poor working conditions. Yeah, workers dying from the virus. Yeah, being having a high risk of COVID-19, and it was also revealed by investigative journalists that at the start, yeah, that in spring, that the protection against the virus was also very poor in these factories, and also in the dormitories and so on. Yeah, so a capitalist can only be a capitalist if he or she exploits labor, and exploiting labor in the very end. Yeah, it's not just exploitation. Yeah, exploitation in order to increase profit. In the end, I mean, the worst form of exploitation is an exploitation where the death of workers is advanced or is tolerated. Yeah, and I think in the COVID-19 pandemic, workers dying because they catch the virus with doing bullshit jobs in meat processing factories. Yeah, that's a very good example. And these working conditions that these poor immigrants are facing in the meat processing industry remind me of the analysis that Friedrich Engels was giving of 19th century capitalism, especially in his book, The Condition of the Working Class in England. And of course, Engels, we just celebrated in November Engels' 200th birthday. The journal that I edit, CCC, Communication, Capitalism and Critique, we did a special issue on Engels. I mean, there's lots of things got written about Engels, yeah, but in this special issue that I edited, I was interested in people reflecting especially on how does Engels matter in the context of digital capitalism and including digital labor. Yeah, and I think the Condition of the Working Class in England is Engels' masterpiece, really, written in 1845. you could say in this book really is one of the works that grounded critical political economy. And one concept from it is the concept of social murder. In a nutshell, this means that Engels said that the industrial workers in England in the 19th century were facing so poor working conditions, overwork, and so on, terrible working conditions, diseases, and so on, that they died from being part of the working class. So social murder means that capitalism results in working conditions that kill human beings. You could say capitalism dehumanizes because it murders members of the working class socially. That's the concept of social murder. So Engels writes in The Condition of the Working Class in England, society places hundreds of proletarians in such a position that they inevitably meet a too early and an unnatural death, one which is quite as much a death by violence as death by the sword or bullet. It deprives thousands of the necessaries of life, places them under conditions in which they cannot live. So working conditions that are so terrible that they cannot survive. They don't have enough food to eat. They don't have clean drinking waters. They don't have proper shelter. They don't have social protection at work. The wages are poverty wages, and so on. Where Engels continues, capitalism places the workers under conditions in which they can neither retain health nor live long. It undermines the vital force of these workers gradually, little by little, and so hurries them to the grave before their time, and so on. So why I'm using this concept is that I think social murder also exists today. I mean, it exists exactly in these meat processing factories, where workers have to go because they have to earn a living. They cannot work from home. There are no meat slaughtering robots, although this would be the good alternative, to this bullshit work of meat slaughtering and meat processing that is so low paid and poor working conditions. So what is happening there is social murder in 21st century capitalism. So it continues to exist today. And in my article in this Engels at 200 special issue, there's a very long article, not the introduction, but the article that follows after that, where I give lots of other examples of how Engels matters today for the analysis of digital labor. So if you're interested in learning more about Engels, have a look at this CCC special issue. We'll skip over some things. My second example is the gig economy, a different type of work now, not the transformation of work by digital technologies in the pandemic crisis, a specific type of work, freelancers in the digital economy who use freelance platforms like Upwork, Freelancer, or Fiverr in order to find work. So they are typically for what in neoliberal ideology is called gig economy nowadays. And the gig economy promises in its ideology that by being a gig worker, you have a self-determined life, that is your work is self-fulfilling, you can be creative, so you earn very well, and it's self-determined work. Upwork is one of the world's largest freelance platform. I mean, basically what it does is there are people who are looking to hire people to do some work, mainly digital work, like designing a logo or creating a website and so on. And then there are the freelancers who have these skills. They are digital workers. Most of them are university educated, from design, arts disciplines, media, cultural studies, cultural industry studies, and so on. Upwork is one of the most used freelance platforms in the world. Also, Freelancer or Fiverr are highly used platforms. These are just how these platforms present themselves. For example, here's someone, Rob, looking to get some work done, and he can get more done with freelancers that he hires on Upwork. Or Upwork says you can find in-demand talent on demand. Upwork helps you to do that because it expertly connects professionals and agencies to businesses seeking specialized talent. I mean, you can also see that here it always talks about professionals. So the freelancers are not workers, they are professionals, yeah, and they are agencies and businesses, yeah, and it's presented like a business-to-business transaction that takes place here between a business that wants to get some work done and a freelancer who is also a business and a professional who offers the work, to do the work. Yeah, but there's no talk about the freelancers being part of the working class. Yeah, so these kind of platforms and this kind of Silicon Valley ideological newspeak, it tries to avoid speaking about labor. Yeah, labor does not exist in the universe of Google and Silicon Valley and neoliberalism. They try to purge the word labor and working class from our vocabulary. They say, oh, we are all entrepreneurs. Yeah. So the entrepreneur is really the worst term that was ever invented. Yeah, no, entrepreneurialism is a bullshit neoliberal ideology. Yeah, that has just resulted in the exploitation of precarious workers and the creation of a precariat that is part of the global working class. So my argument is that these freelancers are not entrepreneurs; they are part of the global working class, and many of them are precarious workers. Or Fiverr says, find the perfect freelance services for your business. That's how it advertises itself. How all of these platforms, freelance platforms, work is that, there's a transaction between the person or company wanting to get some work done and the freelancer, yeah, and money changes hands between the freelancer gets some money, yeah, the person wanting to get the work done pays for it, and then these platforms charge a certain rent, you could say, a certain fee on the transacted money. Yeah, so you could say that they exploit the workers here also by this service fee that they charge. So that's a kind of profit that they are making. Yeah, and that's how the whole platform economy works. If you think of something like Deliveroo or Uber and so on, they just have the app. Or in this case, with the freelancers, it's a platform that is controlled as a means of production. Yeah? The code is not accessible; it's encrypted. But basically, Uber, it does nothing. Basically, yeah, it just has the algorithm, but the work is done by the taxi drivers. And same with Deliveroo. Yeah, the bike drivers, yeah, who deliver food, they are the workers. Yeah? Same with the freelancers. Here, the platform does not really do anything productive. The work that is being done is the design of logo or of a website and so on. Yeah, and the surplus value goes into the pockets of the platforms. I made an analysis on Upwork of the most frequently offered jobs or types of work that are offered there, like data entry, web development, article and blog writing are the types of work that are offered by the largest number of workers on Upwork. You can see these are all like digital. It's all digital work, yeah. Because it's done over the internet. The output is digital, yeah. You enter data into a database, yeah. You develop a web presence, yeah, or a website, yeah. You write a digital article that is published on a blog and so on. So they are digital freelancers, these workers, yeah. There were also, for some time, there were statistics available at the aggregated level of how many workers on Upwork earned how much money. And this was done some time ago, but 2/3 of all registered users never had earned anything. And only 2.5% had earned more than $10,000 US during their lifetime on the platform. This means that many active online freelancers are unemployed or underemployed. They cannot really find enough work for earning a living on the one platform. Yeah, which means that precarity of work not just means that they have low hourly wages and so on, or actually they have no hourly wages. They are paid per project, you could say. Yeah, but it also means that they cannot earn a living just from being on one platform. They have to be on multiple platforms. They have to do many different activities. So maybe one of them not just does data entry, but also blog writing, yeah, and graphical design, and some research, and some translation, and some copywriting, and some editing, and maybe even some software engineering. And if all of this does not help, maybe even also some taxi driving for Uber. Yeah? And if this does not help, maybe even some bike driving for Deliveroo. Yeah? What this means is that many of them might have more than one activity, more than one job. Yeah. So, I mean, the gig economy, this silly term, ideological term, it comes from playing a gig, like a musician. Yeah. And being a musician, it sounds so great. Yeah, great life. Yeah, you go from one gig to the next, you earn lots of money and so on. But of course, we know the music industry. I mean, it's controlled by the big four record labels, and there are very few people who make it in the music industry. Most musicians are working poor, actually, and it gets harder to sell music and to earn a living from music, because then there are the streaming platforms and so on that hardly pay any royalties to the musicians. So actually, working like a musician sounds great, yeah, but most musicians are working poor. Also, they face mental health problems. Lots of them are alcoholics and so on. Yeah, there's a study that was done by two of my colleagues at the University of Westminster, Sally Gross and George Musgrave, which was just published as a book in the University of Westminster Press, and they analyzed the working conditions in the music industry and in the gig economy, showing how the musicians end up not just being low paid, but becoming mentally ill, alcoholics, and so on. There is lots of empirical research, of course, about the gig economy. I'm interested in the UK because I'm living and working there. Yeah, in one study found out that around 5% of the employees in the UK are part of the gig economy, and it was a projection that this will further grow. Certainly in the pandemic now, this type of work from home as a freelancer has certainly grown, because certain people have less income, or have lost their jobs. They work from home, so they will look for work from home, so they will go to these freelancer platforms. Yeah, but then in this one study here, there was also an analysis of the hourly wages. Yeah. Gig workers were asked, what do you earn on average per hour? And those who are transport workers and used such platforms, say back then in 2017 when the study was done, it was £6 per hour. Those who deliver food, like the £6, that's the delivery workers or the Uber drivers, £6 per hour. Yeah, and then those who arranged work via an online platform, these are the online freelance workers, a bit more, £7.70 per hour. However, at this point of time, the minimum wage in the UK was £7.50, which meant the Uber and Deliveroo drivers, on average, were earning below the minimum wage. Yeah, and the problem, of course, is that this is an unregulated labor market. I mean, what jurisdiction does count here? We do not know, because it's workers from all over the world competing with each other via the freelance platforms. Yeah, but of course, living conditions and average wages look different in different parts of the world. Yeah, so the only solution that could be introduced here is like the Bernie Sanders idea of a minimum wage of $15 per hour. I think this would be a good demand for digital labor unions, as far as they exist, or other unions, and also left-wing and socialist parties. The introduction of minimum wages for platform workers, at least $15 per hour. Sometimes it's hard to measure because they are paid not per hour, but per taxi ride, or per delivery of food, or per project conducted on Fiverr or Upwork and so on. Yeah, but this should probably be changed. That, I mean, there could still be project-based work, but there should always be at least like this minimum amount of $15 per hour, which would stop like the undercutting of wages and the competition between digital workers on freelance platforms as a downward spiral. Yeah, if there's a minimum payment for all workers. And how this should be financed is not by increasing prices, but by lowering the profits of the platforms. Yeah, I mean, in the end, the goal would be to cut out the middlemen, also to eliminate the platforms, so that there are worker-owned platforms where the platform turns into a cooperative. Yeah, but that's another topic I cannot address now. The question of how do the alternative look like, and worker self-management. I mean, Trevor Scholz and Nathan Schneider's idea of a platform cooperative and so on. That's a good starting point. However, it also has its limits, because it's very hard to organize alternatives to Upwork or to Deliveroo or to Facebook and so on. Most of these alternatives stay very small and precarious. So like alternative media in capitalist societies also stay small and precarious and highly self-exploitative. Also, no big platform cooperative has emerged. I mean, there's talks now about it since 5 years or longer, yeah, which is why I think the state needs to take a more active role here, and as alternative to, for example, Facebook, Google or Twitter, and especially YouTube, I think we need to think of something like a public service internet and public service media that provide internet platforms as an alternative. But that's just a side comment here. These gig workers, freelance workers, they have what Marx called a piece wage. Yeah? They are not paid by the hour, but they are paid by the piece that they produce. I mean, one piece can be a website, yeah, or a logo or something they designed, a piece of software, and so on. But already Marx wrote in Capital Volume 1 that the piece wage is the most fruitful source of reduction in wages and of frauds committed by the capitalists. That's still true in the platform economy in 21st century digital capitalism. My third final example is digital labor on Google and Facebook. Yeah, so the question: how do Google and Facebook make money? And this is, I mean, if you look at the Forbes World's Billionaire list, the richest people in the world, then you can see that among the top 20, there are lots of digital capitalists, including founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, who is the 7th richest individual in the world, and the founders of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, also among the top 20. Yeah, I mean, so digital capital accumulates also has the actual effect that there are some people who get very rich. Actually, yeah, they are among the richest in the world. Yeah. And then also what we have here are the world's largest tech companies, the world's largest 154 tech companies that are part of the Forbes 2000 list. The Forbes 2000 list is the list of the world's 2,000 largest transnational corporations. And I use such data a lot for doing macroeconomics analysis, yeah, because it allows you, when you have 2,000 companies and you can aggregate their revenues, their profits, yeah, and their wage costs, and so on. It gives you quite powerful statistics about how the capitalist class works at the global level. But 65 out of 154, so that's a relative majority of these digital tech companies that are the largest tech companies in the world, are located in the US. Then there's also China, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, couple of them in India, some of them in other countries. Yeah, there's none in Europe actually, and none in Latin America actually. Yeah, but European Union has tried to copy the US model of creating capitalist tech companies. Already 20, 30 years ago, European Union started policy strategies, different names like iSociety and whatever. Yeah, they wanted to become the most powerful information economy in the world by 2010 by trying to imitate the Silicon Valley model, neoliberal model of capitalist tech companies. But it did not work out actually. Yeah, there is no European Google or a European Facebook or a European Apple and so on. So maybe it was a wrong policy strategy. Maybe European media are stronger on a different model. For example, public service media. Yeah? Think of something like the BBC, which is the largest media company in the UK. It does not use advertising. It has a public service remit. It's not for profit. Why doesn't the BBC operate something like YouTube, yeah? Or a YouTube that is operated by the BBC, together with a global network of other public service media providers. Would be a good alternative. Thus far, it has not been legally enabled. So in fact, BBC would not be able to do something like that, because there's something called a public value test, including a market test. Nonetheless, I want to point out how does Google and Facebook make money. These are the profits of Google, almost exponential growth. You can see in 1 year, 2017, it was not going up, but it was going down. This was a fine that Google had to pay to the European Union. European Union fined Google for monopoly practices. These are the profits by Facebook, also exponential growth. So this makes these two companies two of the world's largest companies in the world. But how do they make money? So they make money by selling advertisements, targeted advertising, digital advertising. So Google and Facebook together control around 30% of the global advertising revenue. That's all advertising revenue, including also advertising in the cinema, on television, radio, newspapers, magazines, and so on. And they control, these two companies, 2/3 of the digital advertising revenue globally. So digital advertising, the largest, most quickly growing form of advertising, it's completely dominated by Google and Facebook. So Google and Facebook are not communication services or internet companies. They are advertising companies. They are the world's largest advertising agencies. That's what they are, actually. These are also interesting statistics of how the structure of global advertising has changed. So what I've taken here is data for global advertising revenue, all advertising that is sold globally for different years, and are broken down by certain media. And you can see in 1980, I also have the table here. In 1980, print advertising accounted for 2/3 of all global advertising revenue. Nowadays, it's 9.5%, less than 10%, which also explains why newspapers are in crisis, because they are advertising based and they cannot sell advertising. And why can't they sell advertising? Because almost around 50% of all advertising revenue goes to digital advertising. There has been a massive growth of digital advertising. So this is this exponentially growing curve that you can see here. And 2/3 of the digital advertising revenue are controlled by the two companies, Facebook and Google. So they sell advertising as commodity, and that's digital capital. But wherever there is digital capital, there's also digital labor. So how is the value? Who are the workers that produce Facebook and Google's value? And I'm basing my theoretical understanding of Google and analysis of Google and Facebook on Dallas Smith theory of the audience commodity. Dallas Smith, you could say he was the founder of critical political economy of communication. He taught the very first class and program in political economy of communication in the 1940s at the University of Urbana-Champaign. He was an economist and started working as a professor of media and communication studies. He then went from the US to Canada. And this essay on communications, blind spot of Western Marxism, is a well-known essay, but he introduces the idea of audience labor and audience commodity, which is sometimes misunderstood, and there's lots of criticism of it. But I think what he tries to explain is the political economy of advertising. He's exclusively in this essay talking about advertising-funded media, and he argues that the commodity is not the television program. Let's assume a commercial television station. You consume it free on air. Pay-per-view and so on is an exception that did not exist back then in the 1970s. But free on air television funded by advertising. Who produces the commodity, and what is the commodity here? And he says, well, the advertising is the commodity, which also means that the attention of the audience is the commodity. So he argues the media companies that are ad financed sell the audience as a commodity to the advertising clients. Yeah? And that's how we introduced the idea of the audience labor, which means when watching commercial television, not public service television where there is no advertising, but watching advertising funded television, the audience, according to Smythe, is exploited when watching, and the watching of the program is a form of labor that produces the attention to the programs, the content, and also to the advertisements. Yeah? And I have taken this idea and have applied it to the question of how do Facebook and Google and similar targeted advertising-based companies make money and profit. Yeah, and of course there's a different commodity here. Yeah, because it's targeted advertising, not simply advertising. Yeah, and it has to do with big data. It's big data driven, and the labor is digital labor. Yeah, I mean these. Users, if you compare internet users, social media users to traditional audiences, yeah, then of course there's like the active audience hypothesis from cultural studies, blah, 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 and so on. And the cultural studies colleagues have told us since decades, yeah, the audience is never passive. They produce meanings by interpreting the content. All of that is true, yeah, but there is a difference now between television audiences who simply watch and social media audiences who create user-created content. So user-created content, writing blogs, yeah, uploading images, making YouTube videos. That's quite different from watching television. Yeah, I mean, also these users, they also watch television. They go on YouTube or on Netflix and they watch something there. But I mean, the affordances of the medium are now of the internet and network computer technologies allow us that we also produce content as users, and that's something new. But Facebook and Google and other digital corporations capitalize on that, yeah, and turn this into class relations where users become part of an exploited working class. That is an unremunerated working class. Of course, they are not paid for these activities, but which also explains the big profits of Google and Facebook. They make so much profit, among the largest companies in the world, because they hardly need to pay any wages, yeah, because the value is created for free by the users who are not remunerated. Yeah, they don't get any money for it. I'm not demanding that when you use Facebook that you should be paid for. Then actually, I think we should create alternatives to Facebook and YouTube and Google and so on. Yeah, but user-generated content is a core feature of this unpaid digital labor. Yeah, it's not just audience labor. Stella Smythe was saying it's unpaid digital labor. Also, the difference to traditional audience labor is there's constant surveillance in real time of all of our activities that we do online, creating a big data commodity that is used for targeting advertising according to our individual interests. So Google and Facebook observe whatever we are doing. Yeah. So I don't know how this stream works, but it's broadcast on YouTube. So probably Google analyzes what I'm saying now. Yeah. And if I would now say 1 million times cat food, dog food, cat food, dog food, cat food, cat food, cat food, if they analyze like speech, then maybe I would tomorrow get some targeted ads on Google for cat food. Yeah, although I don't have a pet actually. Yeah, so but that should just show how important surveillance is as part of the political economy of social media. And of course, that has been pointed out by in surveillance studies by political economists and critical theorists like Mark Andreevich or Oscar Gandy, who wrote this great book, The Panoptic Sword, already in the early 1990s. And then there's the use of predictive algorithms. Yeah, so these algorithms, they predict those who like 99% of those who like cat food and who buy cat food also like to listen to the music of Nirvana and The Doors. Yeah, that's what they calculate with the algorithm. So if you browse a lot on the internet about cat food, then you will get targeted ads about cat food, but also about The Doors and buying music online. Yeah. Yeah. So my point is somehow Facebook and Google are not communications companies, but they are the world's largest advertising agencies that exploit the unpaid digital labor by the users. Yeah, I mean, and that's a bit of like, it means we are also, when we're using the internet and these commercial platforms, we are also working then. It means, like, to speak with Harden Negri and the autonomist Marxist, it means a broadening of the concept of the working class. Yeah, like the idea of the multitude, where there are not just wage workers as part of the working class, but there's also unpaid labor. Yeah, and of course, when this idea that there's unpaid labor as part of the working class is not just limited to the audience labor and user labor. Think of housework. I mean, Dallas Smythe wrote his article in 1977. In the 1970s, there was also the Wages for Housework campaign and the idea of Marxist and socialist feminists that houseworkers, who are predominantly female, also produce surplus value. They are part of the working class, and that they do reproductive labor that reproduces the labor capacity in order to be exploited by capital, which in the end means that in a capitalist society, capitalism and patriarchy interact. Yeah, also capitalism, patriarchy, and racism interact, but all under a capitalist totality, so that house workers are exploited. Yeah, and I mean, these aspects of advertising and consumer culture have to do with consumer capitalism. Yeah, and consumer capitalism is also enmeshed into class relations. It means that partly we can no longer discern strictly between consumption and production. Yeah, so the consumption of content becomes also the production of content, becomes digital labor, yeah, which has lots of implications for the way labor works. Class relations are changing. It also means that lots of our time, yeah, we are enmeshed in class relations, are exploited by global capital and are part of the working class. But at the same time, if we take serious the communist imperative formulated by Marx and Engels in the Communist Manifesto, that the workers of all lands should unite. If so many of us are part of the working class and are exploited for so much time of our daytime, yeah, then this working class is also tremendously powerful. Yeah. So the capitalist class is very, very small. It's just 1% of the world population. Yeah. So if workers rise, yeah, it would actually be easy for them to bring capital and capitalism to a fall and to establish an alternative, yeah, democratic socialist society. Well, this capital accumulation cycle that Google and Facebook are using, it looks a bit different than the traditional capital accumulation cycle that Marx points out in the 3 volumes of Capital, but it starts also with, so that's how Google and Facebook make money. Yeah? It starts with money that they get from banks or from venture capital that they invest into technologies, infrastructure. They have paid workers, predominantly software engineers and people working in marketing and advertising. But these workers using the technologies produce P1, which is a product that is not a commodity. It's the services. It's the Facebook platform. It's the Google platform. Yeah? It's Instagram. It's WhatsApp and YouTube and so on. It's used as given to the users as what Dallas Smythe calls a free lunch. Yeah? Like a free lunch, you don't pay for it. You don't. I mean, the perfidious strange nature of these platforms is also that you go to Google, you search for something, you don't see that money is being transacted, that profit is being made. It looks like a commons, really, yeah, like a digital commons, because you can use it without payment. Yeah, the payment and the monetary transactions take place behind our back. Yeah, so what happens is the platform is not a commodity. So something different must be the commodity. The commodity is the attention and the activities of the users and the data, the content, the metadata that they create. That's the C prime then that is sold as a commodity in the form of it ends in targeted advertisements that are normally sold, not a single targeted advertisement, but in packages of 1,000 targeted advertisements, which also means that there's lots of social sorting going on. Users are constantly sorted into interest groups. They are packaged into groups of thousands, and 1,000 such advertisements that are targeted to specific interest groups. Yeah, like those who like pets. They have a dog and a cat, and they like music by Nirvana. Yeah, that's the commodity that is targeted there with some advertisements. So that's how Google and Facebook work. Yeah? And the difficult thing is that a worker who is a paid worker and goes to a factory or to an office, you can experience exploitation. I mean, there's a manager who's unfriendly or pushes them around or makes them do unpaid overtime. You can feel that you're exploited. You can see it. Yeah. You can also see how much did you get a wage on your bank account each month, and you think, oh, it's not enough. Yeah. And the profits are much higher than the wage I get, and so on. So it's easier to hate the capitalist whom you encounter and to feel exploited by the capitalist that you encounter, or the manager that you encounter in the factory or in the office. Yeah, it's more difficult to feel like and experience yourself as a worker when you use Google and Facebook, because there is no monetary transaction that you experience, that you feel. It's behind your back, the monetary transaction via advertising. I call this the inverse commodity fetishism, because in what Marx calls commodity fetishism, the fetishism of the commodity means that the social relations, the relations of production, are hidden behind the commodity. When we deal with commodities, we just see the commodity. We don't see the class relations behind it. Yeah. Which then results in reification, as Lukács calls it, and so on. At Google and Facebook, it's exactly the other way around. We only experience the social relations of production. We produce on social media, yeah? We produce social relations, user-generated content, and so on. So we see the social relations of production that in traditional commodity fetishism are hidden. But what is hidden from us is the commodity. We don't experience the commodity on going to Google and Facebook, yeah? And so commodity fetishism is much trickier on the internet than it is outside of the internet. Yeah. So wage labor takes and class relations take on a very complex, hidden form when it comes down to Google and Facebook. But successfully, yeah, because Google and Facebook they don't have, I mean, they have been around 20 years now. There was not lots of resistance against Google and Facebook. Yeah? So they could exploit the digital workers of the internet exceptionally high, yeah? And continuing to do so with ever newer strategies. And that has made them part of the world's largest transnational corporations. I could now go on, but I've been speaking for a long, long time, and I told you, I mean, I could talk for hours about digital labor, yeah, but I will draw a conclusion. I would have two more parts, actually, yeah, one about digital capital and one about what is work and communication, yeah, but I would like to refer you to, for reading more about these topics, on the one hand, on digital labor, my book, Digital Labor and Karl Marx. I think that's my most in-depth theoretical analysis of digital labor, lots of conceptualization. And then on a more general level, I've just last year, 2020, published a book about the relationship of capitalism and communication, I mean, which is a political economy and critical theory book, but it starts very fundamentally about the question, I mean, it's about the question how are capitalism and communication related. Yeah, that's my newest theory book called Capitalism and Communication, and you can download it for free as an open access book on the website of the University of Westminster Press. There's also a German translation of it, and I think a Chinese and other translations in the making. So my conclusion is that the information and digital industry economy certainly is a significant part of the economy. Yeah, but the economy is a capitalist economy. Society is a capitalist society. The digital industry, digital capitalism, is one important part of digital society and of the digital economy and of digital capitalist society. It's not the only type of capitalism that we have. There are also other levels of capitalism. Yeah? There is finance capitalism. Yeah? There is industrial capitalism. Yeah? And there's mobility capitalism and so on. Yeah? And these capitalisms, they interact with each other. Think, for example, of how the Silicon Valley companies make money. I mean, they produce some digital platforms, make lots of money with it, Google, Facebook, and so on, but they are enabled by finance capital, yeah, by venture capital. And when they get large enough, they make a so-called IPO, an initial public offering, on a stock market like the Nasdaq index or New York Stock Exchange and so on. So they become, I mean, they have their origin in finance capital. Finance capital invests into digital capital, and then digital capital becomes finance capital. So there's a kind of strange dialectic of finance capital and digital capital. Yeah, they end up also as stock trading companies on finance markets. Yeah, and of course, finance markets are volatile. Financial bubbles and so on. Yeah, digital capital is complex. There's not just one model of capital accumulation. I mean, think now. I talked about how Google makes money, how Facebook makes money. That's one model. Yeah, it uses advertising. But I also talked about something like Upwork or Uber or Deliveroo. That's a platform model where there's a fee on the money that is being transacted via the platform. That's a different model, yeah. So there's not just one capital accumulation model in digital capitalism. There is a variety of it, yeah. It's probably like 10 different models, and I was only speaking about 2 or 3 of them today. Yeah, but there is a more detailed analysis of it, of all of these models, that you can discern the typology. On the one hand, in my book, Capitalism and Communication, and on the other hand, in my book called Marxism, yeah, which is an introduction to how to use Karl Marx for analyzing communicative capitalism and digital capitalism. But wherever there's capital accumulation, there is the exploitation of labor, which means wherever there is digital capital, there's also the exploitation of digital labor. And my point is that digital labor is complex. It's based on an international division of digital labor. Yeah, there's a complex global class antagonism between digital labor and digital capital. And digital labor, we must think of it as a Gesamtarbeiter, as what Marx called a collective worker in what I call the international division of digital labor. But what's the alternative? I mean, that's probably good for discussion. I mean, it's another topic, and I can talk for hours about digital alternatives, actually. Yeah. And in the 3rd edition of my book, Social Media: A Critical Introduction, I completely rewrote the chapters about alternatives. So there are 2 new chapters about the question, what are the alternatives to digital capitalism, actually? Yeah. But I cannot talk about this in brief, just as a conclusion. Raymond Williams, in his great book Keywords, yeah, traces the etymological origin of lots of words that are relevant for understanding media, communication, and culture. And Raymond Williams points out the joint etymological origins of the words communication, community, commons, and communism. So it has to do with doing something in common, yeah. So in a community, people share something, yeah. They share something in their community, yeah. They have something in common features, yeah. In communism, there's common ownership of the means of production, and there is the common advantage of human beings, yeah. There is a good life for all, which means there is not class division, but a universal humanity that is realized in a democratic socialist society. Beyond the economy, I think in a socialist society, there is also a common control of the political system, a common control of culture and everyday life. So that means participatory democracy. Yeah, so socialism is necessarily a humanism and a form of democracy. Yeah, and in communication we make something common also. Yeah, part of our understanding, we share it with others. Yeah, so etymologically, communication, or you could say the essence of communication wants to be shared. Communication wants to be a commons, but it's alienated from its essence in digital and communicative capitalism, where communication becomes a private property and is entangled with alienation, forms of alienation, and with the commodity form in different forms. So actually, capitalism, or digital capitalism, and what Jody Dean calls communicative capitalism, is a false communication society. Yeah? What I have in mind is democratic socialism, which would be a true communication society, a fully developed communication society, where the etymological origin and the essence of communication as being a commons is being restored. Yeah. So democratic socialism is a society of the commons in the sense of all people benefiting and sharing the key resources together, and controlling them democratically and collectively, which also is like the sense of communication is sharing and making something common. Yeah. So really the original etymological root of communication is not that communication is how it's defined in symbolic interactionism, is the mutual symbolic interaction of human beings. That's how lots of communication scholars define communication. Etymologically, communication means making something common. Yeah, in a society of the commons, in a democratic socialist society, key resources are made a commons and are reproduced as a common good. Yeah, so a communication society is not a capitalist society. It's a society where humans control the conditions of their existence in common. Yeah. In the realm of communication technologies, of media systems, I think this means organizing the means of communication as a commons, means, as Marx was writing in the 1840s, that the communication systems should not be a trade, should not be a commodity, but Marx said the primary freedom of the means of communication lies in not being a trade. So I think the commodification of everything, including communication technologies and so on, can be opposed by the commonification, the making commons of key resources in society, including communications resources, which is another way of, by conclusion, to say that I think we need a democratic socialist society as the alternative to not just digital capitalism. I think nowadays we are already in the next phase. I think society will be transformed in the next 10, 20, 30 years, radically transformed. And I think the two alternatives is, as Rosa Luxemburg and Engels were saying 100 years ago, socialism or barbarism. Yeah? I think that we are in a situation in society at a cross point where there is an intensification of nationalism and so on. It's like neoliberalism in a dialectic of on the negative dialectic, turning against itself, producing new forms of fascism and nationalism. And when nationalism and fascism, when they collide, when nationalisms collide, that's what happened at the time of classical imperialism. Yeah, different nationalisms colliding, and what you had is the First World War. Yeah. I would not exclude that we are entering a phase where there might be a third world war, which would be a nuclear war, and it might be the end of humanity. How do we save humanity? By democratic socialism as the alternative. So I think there's when talking about digital socialism as alternative, where we are talking about alternatives to Facebook and Google, and how could they look like? How could the digital working class emancipate itself? How could they run cooperatives that are collectively controlled? That's digital socialism. But digital socialism will not exist without and outside of socialism. Yeah. So I think really the political imperative today is the struggle for socialism, which is the struggle against class society, and in the end, it's the struggle for against war. In the end, it's the struggle against exploitation, and it's the struggle for a better humanity, a society where all benefit, and you could say it's the struggle for love, peace, and the commons. So if I would have a political slogan nowadays, I would say love, peace, and the commons, and that's the struggle for socialism. And I think I'll stop here. Thank you for your attention. I'll stop sharing my screen. It's back to you, Raphael.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Christian, for your excellent presentation and very good examples. We have so many questions for you. I will make 3 questions
Yes.
each time. The first questions are around digital labor concept. So August Gunner asked us, I have questions to Dr. Fuchs. Can we define digital labor today as a praxis, as a Marxist praxis? I understand digital labor as a combination of both intellectual and manual labor, citing Zonrettel. So do you think we can talk about digital labor as a third concept? Thanks. The second question is mine. Recently, Alessandro Gandini wrote an article on digital labor as empty concept, as empty notion. There are also a number of critics around this concept, such as Kangao and Cesar Bolaño, Marxists too. How do you answer these critics? And the last is from Rodrigo Carelli, from Rio de Janeiro. Considering that all work will increasingly be mediated by an algorithm, what would be the interest in a category called digital labor?
All right, I'll answer. Can you hear me? So the first one, I think the book by Zonrettel about intellectual and manual labor is an interesting book. If he would write it today, he would think about how does the digital actually fit in. And if you remember, like my slide about the international division of labor, maybe I can go back to it. Let's see if I can share my screen. There are quite different forms of labor in it. Can you see my slides, Raphael? No? I go back to the slide.
Yeah.
You can see my slides. I go back to the slide with the international division of labor. This one here. There is, based on Zonrettel, there is manual and intellectual labor as part of the international division of labor. So the extracting the minerals, the miners, that's manual labor. The Foxconn workers who assemble the components, that's industrial manufacturing labor. It's also manual labor. Whereas at the content level, the upper level, that's what Zonrettel would call intellectual labor. So indeed, digital labor affects all forms of labor, both manual and intellectual labor. It digitizes this labor, you could say. It's a production of the digital. It has both types of labor that Zonrettel distinguishes. So digitalization affects all types of existing labor. The question is then, is it a praxis? I would say it's a practice. So I distinguish between practice and praxis. Practice just means social production. And practice is, it's a key concept at the level of sociological analysis from a Marxist humanist and socialist humanist perspective. So that there is labor means that there is production of commodities, but then there is not just, and that's a practice, but there's not just practice as production. So I would say practice as production, not just in the economy, also as political citizens. We also produce, we produce political discourses, and so on. Yeah, in culture we produce meanings, yeah, and we produce understandings and hegemony and so on. Yeah, so there's practice going on everywhere. There is the concept of praxis with an X. Yeah, I think that's a political concept. Yeah, so I think praxis with an X. I think it's for the kind of theory and that I'm interested in, the Marxist humanist communication theory. Praxis with an X means class struggle. Yeah, and that's, of course, I mean, capitalist class engages in class struggle against the working class. How do you resist it in digital labor? How can it struggle for higher wages and so on? Yeah, well, by going on strike, by forming trade unions, by forming socialist political parties, by the struggle for socialism. Yeah, so praxis with an X, how Marx understands it, and also how Gramsci understands it, and others, is class struggle. Yeah, and that's a key. And both practice and praxis are both key concepts. Yeah, I hope this answers the question. I mean, I'll stop sharing. You can see me again. Raphael's question about criticisms of digital labor. You know, there are like 5 or 6 different criticisms, and I cannot discuss this in detail now because it's such a complex discussion now. But when I wrote this book, Digital Labor and Karl Marx, there were lots of answers to it, including like a special issue of the journal The Information Society. And I wrote my answer to it, to all of these debates, in a chapter in the book Culture and Economy in the Age of Social Media. There's one chapter where I answer to all these points of criticism. I also answered in other places, but there it's really summarized. Yeah, and I mean, one point of criticism is that that unpaid labor is not productive labor. Yeah, and when we are using Facebook and Google, it's just a form of rent. Yeah, and only wage labor can create value. Yeah, and my answer to this has always been that I think, and this was already, I mean, it's not just a criticism by some people in the digital labor debate on my conception. Already when Dallas Smythe was writing in 1977, then there were similar Marxist critics, yeah, saying, oh, audience labor is not real labor, it's not productive labor, and so on. Yeah, but my answer to it is that I think that those who say only wage labor is productive labor, I think it's a wage labor fetishism. Yeah, so there's not just capital fetishism, there's also a wage labor fetishism, and it also means that certain groups who produce commodities are not being exploited by the capitalist class. So I think it's also an anti-feminist position. Yeah. This position, because I mean, you know, the old criticism of socialist feminism, of orthodox Marxism, was that they only considered wage labor as productive, and class struggle should only be fought by the industrial workers, yeah, who work in factories. Yeah, I mean, the most orthodox Marxists in Trotskyism and so on, they would even say that it's not just wage workers who are only productive, but it's only the industrial wage workers who are productive. They would even deny that service workers are productive. Yeah, but these orthodox representatives, they also deny that house workers are productive. But of course, in my Marxist understanding, they are productive because they produce a commodity. I mean, Marx says like productive labor in capitalism is labor that produces a commodity that yields a profit. Yeah? But the house workers produce a commodity, they are unpaid, the commodity is wage labor capacity. Yeah? And that's reproductive labor. Yeah? And now there are other forms of unpaid labor, like audience labor, yeah? Which is also, it's an outsourcing of unpaid labor to parts of the working class. So really the ideal dream, and I mean what you can extrapolate, the ideal dream of the capitalist class is that all labor is unpaid. And you could say the capital, and you know, there's like there are 2 parts of the working day, the paid part and the unpaid part. There is what Marx calls necessary labor and what he calls surplus labor. And there's necessary labor time and surplus labor time. And because there is necessary labor time because the capitalist class has to pay a certain part of the working day for the working class to continue to exist. But in their ideal fascist world, they would like to pay nothing to the working class and would their dream is that all labor is unpaid labor. Yeah, that's what they are striving for, and that housework is unpaid just means an externalization. Yeah, there is not a welfare state taking care of certain welfare and care activities. Well, it's house workers doing it. Yeah, or there's privatization of lots of care activities and so on. And similarly, on the internet, there's outsourcing of of labor that is not waged, but towards unpaid labor. Yeah, so it's just the expansion of the neoliberal accumulation model, where the capitalist class tries to drive down the wage sum in order to increase profits. So it tries to reduce the wages and the wage labor time, the total time that is remunerated, and to increase the time that is unremunerated. Yeah? And what also fits into the picture is precarious labor, yeah? Precarious workers, also in creative and digital industries and so on, and other industries that work lots of hours, but they get very little money for it. Yeah, if they work lots of hours, 60, 80 hours, but they just get the average salary of other workers for like 20 hours, then there's lots of unpaid labor. Yeah, so I mean, you know, David Harvey defines neoliberalism as accumulation by dispossession. Yeah, and I think what is also being dispossessed is like paid labor time. Yeah, there's lots of outsourcing towards unpaid labor time. So I would say my analysis is a truly original Marxist analysis, where I'm analyzing that the unpaid labor, the capitalist class tries to increase the unpaid labor time, and successfully. And the outcome of it is that there are very profitable companies, Google, Facebook, but also the others that exploit freelancers who do lots of unpaid work, yeah, Upwork, the Uber, and so on. Yeah, so I think that fits into the picture of political economy. But there, you know, there is not one Marxist political economy. There are different approaches to it. So I also accept that there are other approaches that say, well, just wage labor is productive. We can have an argument about it. Yeah, but I stopped reading like all of the responses that were written in response to my theory of digital labor, because it partly left like civilized discourse. Yeah, there were like articles by some people where they were writing Fuchs is a fascist and a racist and so on, because of the concept of digital labor, the way I presented it now. Yeah, and I think that's where we're no longer, when you're saying like other Marxists are like fascists and racists and imperialists, that's where civilized discourse stops. It's not a comradely debate any longer. It's just nonsense, actually. Yeah? And I think I responded to I think there are 5 or 6 counter arguments, and I responded to it in Culture and Economy in the Age of Social Media. And I mean, this discussion continues and so on, but basically it's always the same, like 5 or 6 arguments. Yeah, I think, I mean, it should be possible to also within critical theory have like a civilized debate, and sometimes with this digital labor debate, what has been written has gone too far, actually. Yeah, almost like a kind of Stalinist debate. Yeah, I mean, I think a very orthodox Marxists they try to sometimes make arguments in order to try to crush the arguments of other Marxists, and they have always this argument, but then you are not a Marxist, and so on. Yeah, but who says what is a Marxist? I mean, Marx himself said there is no such thing as a Marxism, really, that he would not be a Marxist himself. Yeah, there are different interpretations of Marx, and taking Marx as a starting point. Yeah, and as long as people agree on like that the political goal is democratic socialism, yeah, that's something that they actually share. Yeah, so I think there should be within critical theory discourses that we should more stress what certain approaches have in common, and not just what separates them. Yeah, because in the end, all of these people, I mean, probably support the struggle for democratic socialism. Yeah, and I'm much more interested in what unites approaches than what separates approaches. Yeah, which is also why I'm critical of any postmodernist approach, because postmodernism fetishizes differences. Yeah, and sorry, I'm not so much interested in what makes human beings different. I'm so interested in what do they have in common. Yeah, what makes us a common humanity that is also a common working class that is struggling for socialism. Yeah. All right, and the third question then was about algorithms. The question of how is digital labor related to algorithms. Yeah, I mean, I would say the algorithms, they operate at the level of the means of production. Yeah, so there is no digital capital without algorithms today. And I mean, if I go back to the example of Facebook and Google, of course, the means of production that Google operates and Facebook, it's all algorithm driven. Yeah, because if we compare like traditional advertising that Dallas Smythe was analyzing, he was basically analyzing US and Canadian television. Yeah, of course, there were algorithms and computing back at this time, but they were not algorithms driven by artificial intelligence in the 1970s. Yeah, used for analyzing how advertising should be organized. But of course, the data that is collected about usage behavior, well, that's done by bots, yeah, and it's analyzed by algorithms, yeah, and the sale of the advertisements is not done by sales agents on the telephone, yeah, it's done by algorithms, yeah, it's an algorithmic auction, yeah, and I mean, and the Google algorithm is, of course, and the search algorithm is an encoded algorithm. We do not know how it works. Facebook uses similar algorithms, like for what postings are presented on your wall and so on. So digital capitalism is at the same time an algorithmic and an economy, yeah, and driven by the combination of algorithms and artificial intelligence, yeah. And it's, the exploitation of digital labor is done by digital capital, and algorithms are a characteristic or a feature, yeah, of digital capital. Yeah, it's subsumed under digital capital. It gets more interesting, the question, when you ask yourself, can there be a non-capitalist algorithm? Yeah? If you imagine something like a public service internet that is run by the BBC and PBS and other public service broadcasters, yeah, a global network, should they be using algorithms or not? Yeah, I mean, let's imagine there's a music platform for music sharing, yeah, something like a Spotify, but where Spotify owned by musicians, yeah, and there's no profit made because it's a worker owned. The musicians, the artists are the workers, yeah. So, but we still pay like a monthly fee, yeah, of £10 or £20, yeah, or dollars, and everything goes to the workers. It does not go to a company, yeah. So you could say that's collective control. But should there be an algorithm? Yeah, probably, maybe algorithms, but they would have to work differently. A kind of public service or commons-based algorithm. Yeah, on the one hand, these alternative algorithms would be free software, so the source code would be available, so that it could be reprogrammed and observed what it is doing. Yeah, but I think it would still be useful that when I listen to music on a socialist music platform, or when there's a socialist YouTube or a public service YouTube and I watch videos there, I still would like to get suggestions of what else would I like to watch. Because let's say I'm watching videos about digital capitalism. Yeah, it would be useful if I still get suggestions of what other videos could be interesting for me about digital capitalism, or what podcasts could I listen to, because it would help organizing all of this knowledge. The question is just, how does the algorithm work? And it should work on different principle than a Google algorithm, because the Google algorithm in the end is manipulated by money. If you pay money, yeah, buy a targeted ad, you can buy attention. Yeah. So the principles of the algorithms should change, but I think like the recommender principle could still exist somehow. I don't know how it should look like. I mean, that is what would have to be figured out by socialist software engineers. So I do think that algorithms do not disappear in a digitalist socialist society or in a framework of digital socialism. Yeah, they take on different forms. Yeah, so just like we need alternative platforms, that we need to appropriate like the digital commons. It also means appropriating, changing, transforming the algorithms. Yeah, coming up with alternative algorithms. Yeah, but you know, like an algorithm is as old as mathematics. Yeah, I mean, it's just a kind of an algorithm is just a sequence of mathematical instructions. Yeah, and every software program uses algorithms. Yeah, I mean, what is new now is algorithms operating on big data and algorithms being driven by artificial intelligence. I think that's new, but I mean, the two main usages today are digital capitalism on the one hand and state surveillance on the other hand. Yeah, and I mean, if you remember like Edward Snowden's revelations, it also and also the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I mean, like the political surveillance and the political motivation of getting access to big data and manipulating it and spreading fake news and so on, and the economic surveillance done by Facebook, Google, and so on. It also interacts so that there's a kind of surveillance industrial internet complex, you could call it. Yeah, I mean, I do think that in the end that a socialist economy and a socialist media landscape, that would be a democratic media landscape, or a democratic socialist humanist media landscape. It's based on human interests. Yeah, it would also be privacy friendly. There would simply, if you have a YouTube or a Google, a Facebook that follows the public good and the common interest, the human interest, there is no need to store all of this data constantly forever on server farms, as Google and Facebook do, and use it for economic purposes. There's no need for it. It could be stored in a decentral way, yeah, metadata only as far as it's necessary for operating the platforms, yeah, but there's no need to store usage behavior, yeah, on servers, yeah, no need for it actually, yeah. You don't have to store it at all, yeah, or maybe the algorithms who store specific aspects of it, yeah, in anonymized form, yeah, for making some form of recommendation, but not for economic purposes, yeah. But I think it's an interesting discussion about alternative algorithms, and more work must be done on this. And I know that there are people working on the idea of public service algorithms, yeah, so the idea of a public service internet, which in my opinion is the true alternative. Yeah, I think public service media being enabled to start operating internet platforms like YouTube or Netflix and so on, or on Spotify. Yeah? I think there's the true power for an alternative. Whereas I fear that the idea of the cooperative and the platform cooperatives, it's a nice idea that should also be tried and so on. But most experiments also fail, just like in the whole alternative media sector. Yeah, I mean, most alternative media projects, including alternative digital projects, are really fair, democratic, beautiful, and small and unimportant. And they don't reach a massive amount of users and audiences and so on. And most of the time, they are based on voluntary, unpaid labor. Yeah, where you don't feel exploited, but you exploit yourself actually. Yeah. So, and that's the dilemma of operating alternatives that do not rely on some form of state power. And the power, I mean, public service media are not state media. Yeah. True public service media are independent organizations, but they are enabled by the law. Yeah, and they are funded by a license fee, and the license fee is also enshrined in the law. And I think that's a much more powerful principle than the principle of an alternative civil society-based economy. I mean, I'm not opposed to to citizens media and ideas like this. I think it could be integrated. I mean, nowadays we have lots of private-public partnerships. I mean, that's part of the neoliberal newspeak, yeah, that they want public services to cooperate with capitalist companies, yeah. I think that's wrong, yeah, and it should be driven back. What we need is public services operating with civil society organizations and NGOs. In the realm of the media, this would mean the so-called sector of citizens media / independent / non-corporate alternative media, civil society media, should cooperate with public service media. You could say that's a public commons partnerships in the sector of the media instead of so-called private-public partnerships. All right, I think that's enough for answering these 3 questions.
Great. The last question, because it's too late now. Some commentary. Ursula Hills said last Friday that platform co-ops have potential, but the risks of hipsters capitalism is around these platform co-ops. So the question from Manfred Knoch: do you see digital workers as potential revolutionary subjects for overcoming capitalism, and which organization is necessary for this? Is the same question from Jussiane Pereira. In your perspective, is possible a rise of the digital workers in a global movement? And also, what do you have to say about the agricultors' strike in India and how these movements could unite? And my question around this is about Alphabet Workers Union, and they are linked to Communication Workers of America Union. How do you understand the role of communication in the tech industry?
Yeah. So I think, this all boils down to what is like the transformative, emancipatory potential of digital workers. Yeah, and I do think that I think digital workers are part of the global working class. Yeah, I think they do have to unite. Yeah, so the slogan would be "Digital workers of the world unite." Yeah. In the end, and the end goal would, of course, be a transformation that results in a socialist society. Yeah, the question is, will this happen tomorrow? I don't think so. That socialism will be established tomorrow. It will be a process. But what happens now are like strikes and working class struggles from below, actually. Yeah, and I do think unionization efforts of digital workers are very important, yeah, because digital capital is organized and digital capital is global, yeah, whereas digital work tends to be individualized, it tends to be fragmented, it tends to be disorganized, yeah, especially in the sector of like software or content and freelancers. Yeah, some of these examples that I mentioned, there's a very low level of unionization. Yeah, and Raphael, you just mentioned the formation recently of the Alphabet Union. So these are Google workers uniting. Yeah, very few of them thus far. Google has like 100,000 of workers, and it's like 600 unionized now, but it's a starting point. I think it's a very good starting point, but it took 20 years. Yeah? It took 20 years until workers at Google had the idea, well, maybe we need a union. Yeah. So it's also, starting unions in the digital sector is also difficult and is precarious also, but of course it must unite around specific struggles, specific questions. Yeah. So I think digital labor unions, and the question is, should there be separate digital labor unions? Yeah, or should digital labor unions be branches of other unions? Yeah, and I think there should be separate digital labor unions, but they should be transnational, not organized just in one country, but organized transnationally, because there is an international division of digital labor. Yeah, and the companies, they act globally. Yeah, and for example, let's say Uber workers go on strike. Yeah, and they have done so, of course. They have done so in different cities, and they are more powerful if in all large cities in the world they coordinate and go simultaneously on strike, the Uber workers, and maybe they demand an hourly wage of $15 per hour, yeah, globally, all Uber drivers, and they put down and they go on strike. They refuse to drive for a week. Yeah, this would really harm Uber and its profits, and that's, I mean, Uber strikes. That would be one example, but of course, I mean, in the end, you know, like for Rosa Luxemburg, she said, like, revolution also and transformation, it also starts with the mass strike. Yeah. So the question is, how does a strike of digital workers look like? Yeah. And I think the strike of digital workers, in some extent, must look a bit different than the classical strike. Yeah. So, for example, the Uber workers going on strike, the problem that you now have is that they are freelancers. Yeah. When they go on strike, of course, they harm Uber as a company, but they also harm themselves because they no longer have any income. Yeah. So I think the strike should look differently. Yeah. Here, there should be a Uber trade union that operates globally, that is a part of a global digital labor union, where there are not just Uber and Deliveroo drivers, which are in the transport sector, but also other digital workers, like software engineers who organize for, I don't know, higher wages in software and better working conditions in the software industry sector. Yeah, but of course, when you have such a large, powerful union and you have different types of digital workers uniting, yeah, they have different skills also. Yeah, and for example, the programmers could then program a alternative app that competes with the Uber app, but is owned by the union and by the workers, and can also be operated in taxis. Yeah, but then when the Uber workers go on strike for the $15 an hour minimum wage, or let's say a living wage of $20 an hour globally for all Uber workers, they go on strike not simply by stopping to drive around in the cab, but by driving for a week with the union app. Yeah, that was produced by other fellow comrades in the digital trade union, and then they switch to this app, and they still have income, but it's against Uber. So that's not just refusal of work, but they continue to work, but in a self-managed manner that at the same time harms Uber, and they can pressure them and say, we could continue like this, but some of us might switch back to you if you pay them the $50 or $20 an hour as the minimum wage or living wage. Yeah. So I do think we need to think differently of what the strike is actually. Yeah. I mean, also the question would then be, how do Facebook users go on strike? Yeah. I mean, by stopping to use the platform probably. Yeah. But by making certain demands probably. Yeah. And there was, like, I think 2 years ago, like an attempt of a 1 day, they did not call it strike actually, but a 1 day consumer boycott organized by Adbusters, you know, the consumer activism organization, against Facebook, Google, Apple, and Amazon. Yeah, they were saying, for 1 day, 24 hours, we don't use these platforms as a protest, because and it was more a consumer critique. Yeah, and I mean, my point that I was making back then was that it's not just a consumer protest, it's a labor struggle. So I think Adbusters framed it as a consumer struggle. It should have framed it as a labor struggle also, yeah, because when we use Facebook and Google and so on, then we are also workers and consumers at the same time. Yeah, so not use people going on strike against Google, not using it for a day or a week and making specific demands. So, for example, Google must make its algorithm public, must make the code public, yeah, or there must be more deliberation on the terms of use. The users must have a say on formulating the terms of use. They organize a strike. Yeah. So that's a labor strike then. But the interesting thing is, because consumption and production issues partly overlap, is that traditionally there are trade unions and the working class, and then there are consumer protection organizations, and there are privacy advocates opposing surveillance and so on. Yeah, I think now all of them, also the consumer protectionist organizations and the human rights organizations and the privacy advocates, they should join forces with the Digital Labor Union to be formed, because issues of human rights, I mean, look at Cambridge Analytica scandal, for example, or Edward Snowden revelations, and issues of surveillance, and issues of surveillance, issues of consumer rights, and issues of human rights are now in digital capitalism also issues of labor. Yeah, so I would subsume them under the umbrella of class struggle and labor issues, which just shows that labor issues are much broader today. And that's also the positive side of digital labor struggles, probably, that it can reach a much larger base, actually, because it can reach into human rights activism, and into anti-surveillance activism, and so on. But my point is, all of these are labor struggles, but these are social movement struggles. Social movements are good and important, and they are grassroots. But I do think we also need political parties in the end. Yeah, we need left-wing socialist parties, and of course they exist in different parts of the world. The left also needs to unite. Yeah, needs to overcome like factionalizing and so on. And the socialist parties, I mean, are struggling for strengthening the commons. Yeah, they are struggling to strengthen the welfare state. Yeah, to strengthen worker rights, to strengthen human rights and democracy, and so on. And I think the digital labor struggles should be seen as part of the larger struggles for strengthening of the commons and the public sphere. And democratic socialism. And for doing this, you need a dialectic of the party and the movement. Yeah? You need class struggle movements, on the one hand, and digital labor unions, and so on. And you need political parties, and you need political leaders for it, like Bernie Sanders and others. Yeah, of course, like democratically elected within the party, and so on. Yeah. But I think, I mean, this dialectic of that there are movements, there are parties, there are class struggles, but class struggles now enlarging into the whole body of the multitudinous social working class. I think that's basically the renewal of social democracy in the 21st century. I mean, that's my bottom line. What we need is the renewal of social democracy, but not social democracy as Tony Blair understood it in the 1990s, or Gerhard Schröder or Bill Clinton and others. Yeah, I mean, that because what happened with social democracy is that social democracy basically became neoliberal. And people were saying, oh, Giddens wrote the book Beyond Left and Right. They're saying, oh, we can no longer distinguish between the left and the right. Yeah, we could no longer distinguish between the left and the right because the former left, the social democratic left, became right-wing, became neoliberal. But now, since 2008, I think the left, I mean, of course, in Latin America, Brazil and so on, this was always different because the left always was much stronger there than in the northern and western countries. Yeah, so that's fortunate of Latin America that you always had a strong left. But in the West, US and Europe, the left disappeared somehow. But now I think the past 10 years it starts reappearing again. And when I say a renewal of social democracy, I mean social democracy that Rosa Luxemburg was standing for. Yeah, I mean a social democracy that struggles for democratic socialism, but sees the unity, dialectical unity of the party and the movement in it. Yeah, but thanks for that question, Manfred, and the other colleague who was asking a similar question. Yeah, I think in the end, debates about political economy boil down to the question: how should class struggle be organized? Yeah, and yeah, so let's go out and organize the class struggle. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Christian, for your answers and your excellent presentation. We had 100 people watching on YouTube your presentation, e nós convidamos todo mundo para continuar nos acompanhando no DigiLabor. A nossa próxima conversa é com a professora Juliette Shore, na quinta-feira, às 10 da manhã, no horário brasileiro, sobre cooperativas, o comum e a economia de plataformas. Nós nos vemos lá e convidamos também para assinar a nossa newsletter. DigiLabor Summer School é uma organização do Laboratório de Pesquisa DigiLabor, da Unicinos, com o apoio da editora Autonomia Literária, do Núcleo de Estudos em Tecnologia e Sociedade, coordenado pelo professor Edemilson Paraná, na Universidade Federal do Ceará, e pelo IHU Unicinos. See you there, Christian.
See you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Paraná.
Bye.